listening to Claim Your Territory, the weekly voice of the Old Capitol Storytelling Festival, telling stories of people making their place in the American West.
Brought to you by the Friends of the Territorial State House and Utah Pioneer Heritage Arts.
Good morning. I'm your host for today's podcast, Clive Romney, and with me today is Nino Reyos. Nino, thank you for being with us
Well, thank
today.
you for the invitation.
Now, I first became aware of you when I heard you were performing for the 2002 Winter Olympics here in Salt Lake City. Tell me how that happened.
Well, there was they had probably about 500 Native Americans. They said that they wanted to have a strong presence in the Winter Olympics because this is the original homeland of the Native American people. So there's probably like 500 volunteers of Native American people representing the 5 different tribes. Now, what they did is...
Name those 5 different tribes.
The Utes, the Paiutes, the Gosutes, Shoshones, and Navajos.
Okay.
And every one of them had except one tribe, every one of them had a flute player. Actually, the Utes had a couple different flute players. Mm-hmm. But one tribe, the Shoshone tribe, actually I represented the Shoshone tribe. They do have some Shoshones who are flute players, but actually, even though I represented the Shoshones, I would, the Gosutes, which is a real small tribe over in the western part of Utah, they didn't have a flute player. So, so I was actually one of the 5 flute players.
Oh, wonderful. And how did you start playing the flute?
Well, actually, it was gifted to me, the Native American flute. In 1993, that was when I began to dance at the Native American powwow. And so, as a result, what usually happens is that people have a ceremony, a coming out ceremony. So my family, we gathered a lot of different items. And so at a powwow at the University of Utah, we had the coming out ceremony. And so we've had different gifts, and one of the individual who came down to bless those gifts was from a tribe up in the Washington area, and so he actually gave me a flute. And so it was a plastic flute, but I played it for a moment, and then I put it away, and then it wasn't too long after that to where when I traded some items with one of my friends who is a flute player and maker. And so that was when I first got my first cedar flute, and it has an inscription on her, 1993. So, and that was the year it was made, and that was the year that I started. I didn't play very often at the very beginning, and actually I just didn't even know where my flute was for a little while. And then probably about 1.5 years, 2 years later, I was looking up in my closet, and then I found my flute. And then it's, hey, there it is. And so then that's when I put it more by my nightstand, and then that's where it really began to start playing.
And now you're even into making flutes.
I'm making flutes. I first started in 2001. I only made a couple then, but then and then I went my own way, and then the person who taught me, he had his shop, and then he lost his shop, and then he moved to different places, and just things just went different ways. And so then I went back about 3 years ago, and I've known this individual for well over 20 years. He was not an Indian, and he had told me that, he says, Nino, this is a travesty, because there's not too many Native Americans who actually make the flutes. Mm-hmm. There's by far more non-Indians who make the flutes. There are a little bit more who play the flutes who are native, but yet still by far, there's not very many who make the flutes for a variety of different reasons.
What's the process of making a flute?
Well, the idea is to be able to, there's different ways, now they're starting to find, historically that used to be just one piece, and they figured it out how to bore with some type of burning of either a rod or even some another piece of wood. Now it has 2 pieces, so it's a lot of high tech, numbers, and so you just find out what type of what key that you want, and then once you figure out what key you want, then you have to do some measurements, because each key will have a certain bore or length.
When you say this is 2 pieces, it's almost indistinguishable. that it's
Yes.
two. That's marvelous craftsmanship.
Yeah, a lot of times the people, they won't notice unless you really start looking at it. And once you start looking at it, then you can be able to see the glue marks. If it's a nice type of a wood like this with the grain is pretty tight like that and the color is all pretty much uniform, then it's really hard to determine on whether it's two pieces or not.
So tell me the process again. I interrupted.
Well, you have two pieces. You figure out what key you want first, and then you make your block, which is about depend on the key again. You let's say for F sharp, for instance, then you have to have at least 24 inches of length, and then about 1.5 inch of a block. You cut that in half, and then you do your measurements on the inside, and then again, it's 7/8 bore, and then half of 7/8 is, you got to do that number, and then you're gonna bore half of the bottom, let's say, and then of the sound chamber, and then the slow air chamber, you do half of that.
And are they different bores, the slow air chamber and the?
No,
sound
they're the
chamber?
same bore,
Okay.
but they're just there's different lengths. For instance, there's two different chambers of the Native American flute. A lot of times people may not be aware of that. The regular recorder that many people may be aware of, the person breathes in one side and the air goes to the opposite end of the flute and escapes on the other side with no obstruction. The Native American flute has a block right here. Right here, and then right underneath this piece right here, it has different names to it. A bird, a fetish, a totem. Right underneath this piece right here, there's like a small little indentation, 1/32 of an inch. And that's where the air goes from the first area, which is the slow air chamber, up over the block, underneath the bird, and then either escapes out of the flute or goes back into the second chamber. So it's pretty high tech. It has a lot of
Yes.
formulations and numbers, but after a little while, just like anything else, it gets pretty easy.
All right. And are you going to be playing some flute at the Old Capitol Storytelling Festival?
I think I'll be able to play some songs, but I don't have a whole lot of time. So I have stories of the more of the traditional songs, like just straight flute music. But I don't have a whole lot of time. But I'll be able to play a couple of songs.
Well, we'll have to give you a little more
Yeah,
time.
yeah. It's kind of it's just a really an honor to be able to be part of that storytelling. But another part too is just really gifted to be able to kind of be able to play it myself.
Well, one of the reasons that we put the Storytelling Festival in the winter is that winter is the traditional storytelling time in the Native American culture. And we wanted to be able to hear your stories. Tell us why that is, that winter is storytelling time.
Well, it's historically during the winter months, the sun goes down earlier, the days are shorter. And so after the Native people, they live in their traditional homes. They don't have lights like we have now. And so after dinner time, they'd be living, in their traditional homes. Now, back then, they lived in extended family. Even today, they live in extended family homes for a variety of different reasons.
So grandfather is there, and grandmother.
Grandmother, or it's not uncommon to be able to see a couple of different generations in there. And so the idea is to be able to know that wintertime is to be able to kind of share the stories and capture the events of the history.
Marvelous. Well, Nino, thank you for agreeing to come to the festival and share your culture through the stories that you will tell there.
Thank you very much. Hopefully that everybody will enjoy the stories.
Thanks for joining us for the Old Capitol Storytelling podcast.
Please join us next time for Claim Your Territory.
Subscribe to our podcast at oldcapitalstoryfest.com. That's capital CAPITOL. Visit our website to dive deeper into our weekly stories and to find other folks who love history, heritage, and modern pioneering. And join us next week to hear another story.
They live on with every newfound friend. I'm still here where stories never end.